On January 29, 2025, a routine flight turned into a catastrophe when an American Airlines regional jet collided mid-air with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter over Washington, D.C. In a matter of seconds, both aircraft plunged into the icy waters of the Potomac River, claiming the lives of all 67 people on board. But how did this disaster unfold? The rhythmic drone of twin General Electric CF-34-8 C5 engines filled the cockpit as American Airlines Flight 5342, a Bombardier CRJ-701ER under PSA Airlines' operational control, descended through the scattered clouds on final approach to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. First Officer Sarah Chen completed the landing checklist, while Captain Mark Donovan maintained their assigned glide slope with practiced precision, the choreography of their actions reflecting hundreds of similar approaches flown before. Reagan Tower, American 5342, established on the river visual, passing 3,000, Donovan reported, his voice carrying the professional calm of a 12,000-hour veteran. American 5342, continue approach, wind 230 at 8, cleared to land runway 19, responded the controller, managing the intricate ballet of aircraft converging on the Potomac River corridor. Meanwhile, 5 miles east, Army pilots Major James Wilson and Captain Teresa Rodriguez banked their UH-60M Black Hawk through a series of low-altitude maneuvers. The helicopter's distinctive whop, whop, whop cut through the autumn air as they executed their training protocol within the specifically designated military operations area. Hawk 37 executing Waypoint Charlie, transitioning to Phase 2, Rodriguez radioed to their command center, unaware of the invisible boundary they were approaching. The National Capital Region's Special Flight Rules Area represents one of aviation's most complex airspaces, a three-dimensional maze of restricted zones, prohibited areas, and security-triggered protocols guarding the heart of the American government. The interlocking system of regulations demands flawless coordination between the FAA, Department of Defense, Secret Service, and dozens of other agencies tasked with protecting everything from the White House to the Pentagon. But systems are only as perfect as the humans operating them. Whether through miscommunication, equipment malfunction, or momentary distraction, critical factors that investigators would later spend thousands of hours analyzing, both aircraft unknowingly entered the same block of airspace. The TCS warning blared in the CRJ's cockpit simultaneously with the controller's urgent transmission. American 5342, traffic alert, military helicopter at your 2 o'clock, take immediate evasive action. In the Black Hawk, Wilson registered the civilian aircraft's presence just as their proximity warning system activated. His instinctive control input came too late. The collision timer had started. The convergence of flight paths, the physics of momentum, the limitations of human reaction time, all conspiring toward an outcome neither crew could prevent. In that terrible instant, the margin between routine and catastrophe, that thin envelope of safety upon which all of aviation depends, was breached, setting in motion one of the most devastating mid-air collisions in modern aviation history. At precisely 15:42:36 Eastern Time, American Airlines Flight 5342 maintained a standard 3-degree glide path, descending through 1,500 feet on final approach to Reagan National. Captain Donovan's attention was split between his primary flight display and the iconic landmarks of the National Mall sliding past his left window, visual references critical to the river visual approach procedure. Simultaneously, the Army UH-60M Black Hawk call sign Nighthawk 37, executed a planned heading change to 310 degrees while maintaining 1,450 feet, mean sea level. The helicopter's mission called for contour flying along the eastern bank of the Potomac, practicing critical infrastructure survey techniques within what should have been a segregated airspace block. Neither crew received the automated conflict alerts that might have prevented what happened next. The NEXRAD weather radar at Andrews Air Force Base captured the moment, two distinct transponder returns merging into a single chaotic signature. The regional jet's carbon fiber wingtip, traveling at approximately 210 knots, sliced through the Black Hawk's titanium main rotor hub assembly with catastrophic energy transfer. Mayday, mayday! The helicopter pilot's transmission cut through the frequency, overwhelmed by the sound of composite materials disintegrating and warning systems blaring. The UH-60's 5 main rotor blades detached in sequence, transforming from precision-engineered lift surfaces into lethal projectiles. The fuselage, suddenly without the gyroscopic stability of its rotor system, pitched violently nose down while initiating an unrecoverable right roll. Aboard Flight 5342, First Officer Chen felt the aircraft shudder violently as the outboard section of the starboard wing separated, taking with it critical control surfaces. Hydraulic lines severed by the impact sprayed their contents into the slipstream, triggering multiple system failures as warning indicators illuminated across the glass cockpit displays. "We've lost control authority," Donovan shouted, fighting the yoke as the aircraft's roll rate accelerated beyond the envelope of recoverable flight. The CRJ's fly-by-wire system, suddenly processing conflicting data from damaged sensors, surrendered to the laws of physics. Both aircraft began their terminal descent, trailing debris and aviation fuel that glinted in the afternoon sunlight. Flight 5342's CVR recorded 16 seconds of desperate cockpit resource management, professional to the end, before impact. The Black Hawk's crew had even less time. At 15:43 and 2 seconds, the helicopter impacted the Potomac first, disintegrating upon contact with the 38-degree Fahrenheit water, approximately 300 yards east of the Jefferson Memorial. 8 seconds later, Flight 5342 followed, its fuselage breaking apart on impact and sinking rapidly into the river's silty bottom. The water's surface, momentarily calm after absorbing the violence of 46 tons of aircraft, began receiving the first floating debris as stunned witnesses along the National Mall reached for their phones, not yet comprehending that they had just witnessed the deadliest aviation disaster in the capital's history, a tragedy that would fundamentally rewrite the protocols governing the nation's most sensitive airspace. The first 911 call hit the District of Columbia Emergency Operations Center at 15:43:27, 25 seconds after initial impact. Within 90 seconds, the Integrated Capital Region Emergency Response Protocol activated, triggering simultaneous deployments across multiple agencies. All units, Aviation Disaster Protocol Alpha, multiple aircraft down, Potomac River adjacent to East Potomac Park. I repeat, multiple aircraft down. The dispatcher's voice maintained professional detachment despite the unfolding catastrophe. Coast Guard Station Washington's 45-foot response boat medium tore across the water's surface, throwing a massive wake as it reached the crash site 7 minutes after the first call. Lieutenant Commander Samantha Reeves, incident commander, surveyed a scene of unprecedented devastation, a debris field stretching nearly half a mile along the river's main channel. Establish primary search grid, 200-meter intervals, she ordered as DC fire and rescue watercraft converged from multiple launch points. Water temperature reading at 36 degrees Fahrenheit. survival window critically short. Park Police helicopters circled overhead, their FLIR systems scanning for heat signatures amid the floating wreckage. Divers from DCFD's elite rescue squad, one plunged into the murky, fuel-contaminated water, fighting near-zero visibility in dangerous currents while navigating the razor-sharp aluminum fragments. Command Diver 1, locating main cabin section, inverted 24 feet down, came the first underwater report at 16:02. No signs of survivors. Multiple victims still secured by seat restraints. Medical professionals waiting on shore knew the brutal arithmetic of cold water immersion. At these temperatures, even uninjured victims faced severe hypothermia within 10 to 15 minutes, with survival chances diminishing rapidly thereafter. For those subjected to the trauma of impact, the prognosis was grimmer still. By nightfall, temporary floodlights illuminated the recovery zone as specialized equipment arrived, side-scan sonar vessels mapping the underwater debris field, heavy lift barges positioning to recover larger wreckage sections, and the stark white tents of the temporary morgue established at East Potomac Park. The manifest of Flight 5342 transformed the national response. Among the 67 souls lost were 28 members of America's elite figure skating community, athletes who had represented the country at world championships, coaches who had mentored generations of Olympians, and rising junior competitors preparing for the Grand Prix final in Helsinki. These weren't just athletes, said Olympic gold medalist Michelle Kwan at an impromptu memorial outside the Capitol Skating Club. They were artists who pushed the boundaries of what's possible on ice. They were teammates, mentors, dreamers. They were family. As Coast Guard vessels maintained their solemn vigil through the night, the aviation community faced a brutal reckoning. The wreckage of Nighthawk 37 and Flight 5342 would eventually be reassembled in NTSB hangars, but the questions their collision raised about airspace management, about communication protocols, about the invisible boundaries separating civilian and military operations demanded immediate answers. Across the nation, skating rinks fell silent. Competition music gave way to candlelight vigils. And in dozens of communities, families confronted empty bedrooms still decorated with medals, trophies, and dreams suddenly and permanently deferred. Within hours of the tragedy, the full weight of the National Transportation Safety Board's GO team descended on Washington. The mobile command center, typically reserved for commercial aviation disasters, became the nerve center for what would become one of the most complex investigations in NTSB history, one involving not just civilian oversight but military protocols, national security considerations, and the intricate ballet of aircraft separation in the world's most restricted airspace. This isn't just about what happened, said NTSB Chairwoman Dr. Eleanor Martinez during her first press briefing. It's about why our redundant safety systems specifically designed to prevent this exact scenario, failed catastrophically. By day 3, investigators had recovered both the CRJ's flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder from beneath 20 feet of silt. The Black Hawk's hardened memory unit, designed to withstand combat damage, was located a quarter-mile downstream. As specialized technicians worked to extract and analyze their contents, a disturbing timeline began to emerge. At precisely 15:39 and 8, 3 minutes before impact, Reagan Tower had transferred control of Flight 5342 to final approach, a routine handoff that occurs dozens of times daily. But a simultaneous shift change at the Pentagon's Military District of Washington Air Operations Center had resulted in a critical communication gap. We're seeing a textbook example of the Swiss cheese model of accident causation, explained former NTSB investigator Captain Robert Sumwalt on national news. Multiple defensive layers, each with their own holes, momentarily aligned, allowing the accident sequence to progress unimpeded. The investigation revealed that Nighthawk 37 had filed a proper flight plan for its training mission, but a delayed NOTAM, notice to airmen, meant the temporary flight restriction hadn't properly propagated through all air traffic control systems. Crucially, the helicopter crew had been operating on a discrete military frequency, creating an information silo that prevented them from hearing civilian traffic warnings. Most concerning was the revelation about both aircraft's collision avoidance systems. The CRJ's TCAS-2 equipment showed evidence of an alert being generated just 4.6 seconds before impact. Far too late for effective evasive action given the closure rate of approximately 300 knots. The Black Hawk's ANAPR 39 radar warning receiver, designed primarily for threat detection rather than traffic avoidance, never registered the approaching regional jet as a collision risk. FAA Administrator James Chen called it a breakdown in shared situational awareness. This happened in one of the world's most monitored airspaces, with multiple overlapping safety systems. Investigators scrutinized Washington Tri-Area protocols, long managing presidential, military, and commercial traffic, now under unprecedented review. Every aviation disaster rewrites the rules. Flight 5342 and Nighthawk 37 will reshape how military and civilian aircraft share U.S. airspace. The Potomac crash site had barely been cleared when aviation officials launched a full-scale response. Within 72 hours, FAA Administrator James Chen and General Allison Wright convened an unprecedented airspace safety summit at the Pentagon. Today, we're not separate domains. We're unified stakeholders in a shared safety ecosystem, Chen declared. The result? The Washington Special Flight Rules Area Reform Act, which created the National Capital Integrated Airspace Command, NCIAC, a hybrid FAA military control center, eliminating the communication gaps that contributed to the tragedy. Technological upgrades followed. The Pentagon fast-tracked MCADs, requiring all military aircraft near major cities to transmit ADS-B signals readable by civilian controllers, ending segregated tracking. Airlines also took action. Bombardier upgraded its CRJ fleet for military transponder compatibility, and pilots adopted slower approach speeds in mixed airspace. At Reagan National, new triple redundant verification protocols ensure instant alerts for any aircraft deviating from assigned routes. Military helicopter training now mandates joint planning and real-time monitoring. Beyond new rules and tech, this tragedy forced a cultural shift. Airspace is now seen as a shared national resource with shared accountability. For Flight 5342 and Nighthawk 37's families, these reforms came too late. But the painful lessons learned may save countless lives in the skies ahead. The 2025 Potomac River mid-air collision wasn't just a tragedy. It exposed critical flaws in aviation safety. When American Airlines Flight 5342 and Army Nighthawk 37 collided over the nation's capital, they revealed vulnerabilities in a system long seen as nearly infallible. Aviation safety relies on redundancy and layered defenses, yet every safeguard failed that January morning. A commercial jet on approach and a military rotor craft maneuvering at low altitude, two vastly different operations, shared dangerously congested airspace. Investigators cited normalization of deviance, small procedural shortcuts that became routine until disaster struck. Communication protocols between Pentagon Air Operations and Reagan Tower had been simplified over time, prioritizing efficiency over safety. The tragic result? Just 72 seconds from first conflict detection to impact, too little time to react. The regulatory response was swift, but are we still too reactive rather than proactive? The new Integrated Airspace Command Structure is a step forward, but it came at the cost of 67 lives. This disaster also forces a rethink of civilian-military airspace management. Traditional separation may no longer be viable as both sectors expand. And despite advanced collision avoidance systems, technology alone isn't enough if human and procedural failures persist. The real lesson? Aviation safety evolves through tragedy. The question now is whether we'll make meaningful changes or just add complexity to an already fragile system. What are your thoughts? Share in the comments below. If you found this deep dive insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more investigations into aviation disasters and safety advancements.